Hi, so my name is Mr. Priestley, and I come into school on a regular basis to help with a number of different issues that young people are facing. My background is in policing. I was a police officer for 17 years, both as a detective sergeant and as a neighbourhood sergeant. This gives me quite an insight into county lines, and that's the subject that I've been asked to talk to you about today. County lines is frankly one of the scariest things that I saw while I was a police officer. I get asked a lot about what the scariest things that you have to encounter when you're a police officer. People want to know about the things that happened. County lines is one of the scariest things that I saw. The county lines is a term used to describe the supply of controlled drugs through a network of mobile phone lines used by drug dealers in large cities who want to pass their drugs through and out into suburban and rural areas. But this is all conducted through the exploitation of children and young people. In 2018, the postcode wars really in London got to a really ridiculous height. So drugs gangs were fighting over areas that they were going to supply to, roughly divided up into their postcode areas. And it got so overheated that statistics showed that London was a more violent city than New York. And this was a fairly unprecedented state of affairs. So the answer for a lot of the drugs gangs was to start supplying rural communities more aggressively and to exploit softer markets in small towns and cities outside of the big areas like London and Birmingham and Manchester and Liverpool and places like that. Cambridge is a classic example of an area that is supplied with controlled drugs through a county lines network. It's mainly Cambridgeshire as a county is mainly rural. And it's linked to London on very reliable, well-established train lines, the M11 corridor. And dealers use hire cars and the train networks to send runners up from the city, from the capital, carrying drugs. And these drugs are mainly heroin, cocaine, including crack cocaine, and cannabis out into our communities. Today we're starting to see levels of violence and brutality creep up in areas like South Cambridgeshire, East Cambs and Cambridge City that were associated with the postcode wars of 2018. So how does county lines implicate young people? Well, the county lines framework is generally sustained by exploiting young people under the age of 16, sometimes as young as 12. Young people are seduced into carrying drugs through minor payments of cash, through material rewards like clothing and trainers, and with the promise of bigger and better things. In reality, the county lines environment is a really devious and dangerous world. We've seen a significant increase in serious street-based violence perpetrated against teenagers, including robberies and knife crimes. Additionally, organised crime gangs use young people as a disposable human shield to protect themselves from prosecution and from physical harm. In many cases, what begins with the offer of lucrative rewards ends up with drug dependency issues and working to pay off debts at extraordinary and unresolvable interest rates. So the threat of physical harm is never very far away, and it makes a lot of sense for a county lines network to have a network of kids who are actually addicted or dependent on the product that they're shipping. For some, and particularly for the girls, the threat of sexual exploitation is also very prevalent, with gangs trafficking girls to parties where the gangs are paid for things that the girls are coerced to do. So girls as young as 13 are commonly assaulted and abused, and statutory rape is a common part of that cycle. By the ages of 16 and 17, many of the young people are already becoming too old to be useful to the gangs that they've been serving, and they're discarded. And by then, for many, criminal conviction, drug dependency, violence, and traumatic recollections are just a part of their everyday life. They're very possibly already suffering with things like paranoia and also PTSD. In a nutshell, what are the risks? Okay, so drug dependency is high on the list. If a drug dealer can get you using, then they can have more control over you, and it's as simple as that. I think everybody knows about the risks surrounding addiction to heroin and cocaine, but they probably don't appreciate the risks surrounding high THC, tetrahydrocannabinol levels in street-supplied cannabis. With THC levels approaching 20% and beyond, cannabis is becoming a psychoactive substance with very long-term implications and more immediate problematic consequences than most teenagers anticipate. And this includes problems around mood swings, anger management, lack of motivation, insomnia, clinical depression and anxiety. Cannabis can be addictive, and suggestions that cannabis isn't an addictive substance are absolutely false. Violence is also a big risk. As I said, serving as a police officer, I saw escalating spirals of violence perpetrated against teenagers on the streets, very sadly woundings, knife crime, not uncommon, becoming far more common. Turf wars have spread out of the inner cities and into unexpected rural areas. Violence has escalated in response to smaller and smaller drug debts, and markets have become saturated and overwhelmed by supply. Prosecution is always a major risk. County lines runners are the front line of protection for any organised crime group, so while the teenage runner is actually a victim of criminal exploitation, the no snitching rule and the fear of reprisals if they do talk often ensure that the runner gets to carry the consequences of their crimes, and this can include facing prosecution for offences such as possession with intent to supply and supplying a controlled drug, which are both very serious offences that can end up in Crown Court and custodial prison terms. So criminal convictions that bar people from career employment options, travel consequences that prevent people from visiting foreign countries, and long-term psychological injuries, as well as obviously physical injuries, either through drug misuse or through traumatic experiences that they're just never able to forget. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not uncommon for people who escape organised criminality. And living in a state of paranoid anxiety and looking over your shoulder is just part of who you become. So you might ask, why do young people get involved in this kind of situation? Well, the truth is that the people who run these networks are very good at what they do in beguiling young people and attracting them in. They make it look very, very appealing. They dangle incentives, and to begin with, they make the risk look very small in return for big rewards. But the truth is, when something looks too good to be true, it usually is. Commonly, I hear the phrase, "I wish I knew then what I know now." It's a common reflection and a regret offered by people that get caught up. But the appeal of going to parties, being popular, seeming to have a strong reputation on the street, wearing cool, expensive clothes, just having some money coming in seems incredibly appealing. The people who run county lines networks use all of these things, including all the modern cultural imagery, music, fashionable labels, social media, everything that they can in order to get people persuaded to get involved and do what they need them to do. But in reality, it's an unregulated, illegal, and it's a brutal business. There's absolutely come back if you feel that you've been treated unfairly or that you've been used from the outset. People offering these opportunities want you to feel that they're your friends, that they're loyal to you. But I've witnessed firsthand what that loyalty is worth. When you end up having to answer text messages and supply coke to addicts at 4 a.m. in the freezing cold, the whole world looks an awful lot less exciting and glamorous. The COVID lockdowns have inflated prices of all drugs across the markets, and children and young people in the UK are paid tiny amounts, promised a great deal, and they carry the majority of the risks. While the users are getting addicted to the substances, the dealers are getting addicted to the money and the profits, and the children and the young people are being exploited by different rival gangs, become a very soft target if they prevent those profits from being made, or if they end up owing money to the criminal organisation they're working for. For the vast majority of people, becoming entangled in this world is absolutely ruinous. For a few, it ends up in self-harm and even suicide. I've met quite a few young people who've been ensnared by county lines. I've never met anybody who didn't regret it.